We're joined now by Arwa Damon. She is the president and founder of INARA, a non-profit organisation that provides medical and mental health care to children incapacitated by human-induced or natural disasters. Arwa, thank you very much indeed for coming on the programme. I suppose this shouldn't really be a surprise that with a vacuum of law and order, such things are going to happen. How bad an impact is this going to have on an already desperate situation in Gaza?
Well, I think we need to clarify a couple of things. First of all, this breakdown of law and order is nothing new. In fact, it is something that aid organizations have been warning about going, as far back as March, something that got significantly more serious and more severe in May once the Israelis went in and took over Rafah and the Rafah border crossing, effectively forcing all of the aid to flow through other areas. And we also need to be clear about another point. A lot of this lawlessness also initially emerged because of cigarette smuggling. And the reason why cigarettes are in such high demand is because Israel has been banning their entry into the Gaza Strip. And as such, a single cigarette on the market can roughly cost you $30 to $40. But what we have been seeing, especially over the last few months, is this increased effort by any number of criminal gangs to try to specifically attack aid trucks. And the area where these attacks and this looting is happening are areas that are under Israeli control. They are in the so-called red zones. And we have repeatedly been asking Israel for either security on those routes or to be able to provide us with alternative routes, none of which has happened. And as such, we once again have a situation, if we just talk about what's happening where I'm located in central Gaza, where people are so desperate that 3 women were crushed to death just trying to get bread because there has been such a shortage of flour and as a result, such a shortage of bread. And with the attack that happened on the World Central Kitchen workers, causing them to suspend their operations, with a strike that happened in northern Gaza on one of the, key chefs at one of the community kitchens there, it's very hard to look at the situation, especially everything that has happened over the last few months, and not think that this is part of a strategy to continue to attempt to starve the population and just amplify the suffering here.
And what is Israel's response when you make those pleas for extra security to help distribute aid?
Well, a whole lot of nothing, clearly, since absolutely nothing has changed and the situation has, in fact, just gotten worse. Israel's default is, well, the aid organizations aren't picking the aid up. Well, yeah, we're not picking it up because the routes aren't secured, or another, sort of go-to phrase is Hamas is stealing all of the aid. Well, that's not exactly the case either. In fact, we have been seeing some efforts on the part of sort of Hamas-affiliated groups to try to secure these routes. There was, I think, a week or 10 days ago, an operation where we actually had clashes taking place between, an armed force and the looters themselves. And so this, like many of the other pleas that are coming from humanitarian organizations to the Israelis, quite simply are not serving to move the needle. You have been hearing this not just from those of us working on the ground, but also from any number of global leaders, any number of other organizations trying to amplify this message of there has to be a flow of humanitarian assistance, especially right now when we look at the levels of starvation and hunger and this imminent famine that is being warned about. Look, I was in Gaza City last weekend. There are numerous children in the hospitals due to malnutrition. One of the medical centers up in Gaza City that has a malnutrition wing, they saw their numbers jump from roughly 150 patients coming in a day up to 350. There are children there whose bodies are simply too weak to be able to both fight hunger and fight the need to heal. There are children who are injured, who are unable to properly heal from their wounds. There are children who are born with pre-existing conditions who are also very quickly succumbing to their bodies wasting away. We also see this in central and in southern Gaza, where we're located right now. So by all counts, and this is my 4th trip into Gaza, every single time I come in, the situation is just increasingly exacerbated and exponentially worse.
And you'll, of course, be in touch with UNRWA and no doubt World Central Kitchen as well, which has also suspended operations following another attack on its aid workers. Have they given you any indication as to when those services might get back up and running?
No, we don't necessarily know quite yet. And let's also be clear, what UNRWA is saying is that it is suspending aid specifically through the Karem Abu Salem checkpoint. So they're not suspending their operations across, all of the Gaza Strip. But it's also allowing me right now to talk about something else that's very important, and that is, Israel's attempts to sort of ban UNRWA from working in Palestinian territories, which would also include Gaza. And that is something that is of great concern, given that there is absolutely no other organization that can step in and fill the void that UNRWA is going to be leaving behind. There are hundreds of thousands of people sheltering in UNRWA schools who are relying on UNRWA's humanitarian aid distribution capacities. There is no other organization that can really step in and take UNRWA's place, especially not at a time like this, when we're not just seeing these, increased levels of hunger and these malnutrition rates going up, but also at a time when we're seeing every single aspect of just about anything that you could possibly imagine being remotely related to life support actually on life support itself. We keep saying this over and over again. Those of us who are part of the humanitarian community here, we are not going to willingly stop trying to help the population with whatever it is that we have. But the sense really is that Israel keeps trying to take these tools away from us or make it exponentially difficult to try to, use them in a way that's going to benefit the population. If we just look at where the famine warnings are at their worst, which is in the northernmost part of Gaza, that effectively is an area that is under siege within a siege, roughly 90 requests to deliver humanitarian assistance to that area have been denied. There are people there who are trapped. Ambulances are not permitted to reach these areas in the aftermath of bombings. If we look at what's happening in Gaza City, all you can effectively buy to eat in Gaza City is bread. And then in some bizarre twist of events in the way that things end up panning out here, if you look at central and southern Gaza, you have an extreme and very dire flour shortage. It is a situation where no matter how hard you try to do the mental gymnastics to try to circumvent all of these roadblocks that Israel is putting in front of us, doing even the smallest thing for the benefit of the population becomes extraordinarily difficult.
Arwa, we really appreciate you joining us and making time for the News Hour today. That's Arwa Damon, President and founder of INARA, joining us from Deir al-Balah in central Gaza.